Welcome back, everybody, to Effective Education. My name is Joseph. I'm a producer and conductor for these conversations. My job in the professional world is to help professionals like you understand and utilize web media to the best of your abilities. And I'm here with Pavel Koryagin, who is the star of the show and has put in a lot of time and effort to put this series together. Pavel has a lifetime's worth of experience as a CTO, and his world-class ability to self-teach has made him the go-to expert for people looking to transition from beginner to expert, from expert to master, and master and beyond. Pavel, I hope everything is going well with you today. Are you ready to get started?
Hi, Joseph. Yes, everything is all right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks to you once more for putting this together. So here we go. Today we want to talk about learning techniques and training, and we want to definitely focus on that aspect of it. So what is the fastest way to train a programmer, and how quickly can somebody really be ready for work in this field?
There is no simple answer that would be uniform, that could predict the track of every person because we all come with different background. I often see my students on mentoring who are switching from other professions like managers or salespeople, but they could already had some experience from their schools. And if they have some talent, that this experience converts to the preceding ability to actually write the code. So we only have to train them to fit their corporate requirements to get the first job. And if you don't have a specific talent in that area, this is still not a problem because you still could find a joy in this area. However, it could take more for you to get the necessary skills, to get the necessary automated thinking, to solve the tasks better. I see often people do it in 3 months from starting to actually getting their first job, but this is kind of extreme yet real. So many people do not suspect then that they are able to do it in 3 months. However, if you want to get some better prediction, you should be more conservative, thinking of something that will take months. But definitely, if you don't do it in 1 year, then something is wrong with the way you learn. So it should be between 3 months, so that's very optimistic, but no longer than 1 year for to get your first job. Today we're going to talk about the other learning technique that will that you will practice beyond that term of 3 months or 1 year to grow in your profession. But to start, you should do that in 1 year if, to prove that your method is correct. And if you're doing that longer, this doesn't mean that something is wrong with you. That something is wrong with the method you use. That's my strong belief.
So it's highly likely that somebody just has to search for a different method and just try to learn it in a different way. And what I think is interesting is because you said people can come from, for instance, the sales background and want to make their way into programming. So it sounds to me like it's also important for people to take their past experience and maybe how they've applied themselves before and see if any of that can help them in this new field. So a salesperson versus a logistics expert might have two very different ways that they're going to be learning programming, or frankly anything, right?
Yeah. And that's actually the advantage if you already have a lifetime experience working in real business. Because coding and working as a software developer is more about solving the tasks, solving the problems. And we could never define the task perfectly in all the details with text or explanation or whatever. So you have to use your common sense just to understand what are you going to do. And that's the very important part of the work of a web developer. And AI, new AI assistants are not going to substitute that part, at least today, but they're already writing code perfectly. So yes, people who have this experience of real work and problem solving have this advantage when they are switching. And I often see that students underestimate their ability because they think that the resume will look bad when you're looking for a developer position, but you're not a beginner, you're not a graduate. Both cases have its own advantages. I think we should return to that topic of what it takes and how it takes to get to the profession faster. And in particular, we are getting closer to the distinction of what was previously introduced in our conversations as meta skills.
Right. So meta skills is one of the skills and I guess, the techniques that we wanted to cover. And we did talk about this somewhat in the last episode. So what I think we should do is just quickly review meta skills, but also soft skills, hard skills, and also habits. To my recollection, we didn't actually review habits last time. So I think it'd be great to add that into the conversation as well.
Great, but habits characterize all these skills, because if you know, for example, how to find an element in a collection, that's a hard skill. But you could know that, and the respective code could automatically pop up, and you could type it as a complete automated action. And the same, it works for your soft skills. You know that you should ask your manager for more details, but this could also feel that something obvious for you. And that's the difference between and it is a habit of you. And the same with meta skills. So we have these two dimensions. Actually, the nature doesn't break up in categories. We humans do that to be able to understand things, to catch the ideas. So we separate all the things we do into skills, into individual skills. We've got lots of different skills, and then we introduce these categories to find the balance, to focus on us better on what we do. And I introduce the word meta skills as a missed category, the skills of how the ability to change and improve the ways how you learn, how you work, how you solve tasks. And that category is extracted because you could learn and further train those skills as a separate activity. That's one dimension. We arrange these things into hard, soft, and meta skills. And another dimension is how you actually operate with every skill. So at first, you get some idea that the skill exists and you could misunderstand it. So the next, what you do is you get the clear explanation of what it is, and then you switch to training that skill. And after a while, the skill becomes your habit and a part of your nature. So you don't have to practice this thing as something conscious, as a conscious action anymore. It just goes naturally. And this sequence might sound familiar to you, but it is a trap to think it exactly as a sequence because, for example, in learning languages, many people, and including me, are experimenting in switching the training and the learning. So if you start training before you start learning, that would work even better. And that's how we learned our first language, our mother tongue. We practiced and we get feedback from the people around us. And the same could work better in education. But I know that some people experiment with practice only ways of language learning, but I tried to combine both. So you do the preference for training, for practice, and letting your unconscious to understand the patterns and get that proficiency, but also you find yourself stuck sometimes. in some contents, uh, trying to understand why it is that strange. And in these moments, the good explanation will help you stop thinking about that and release your capacity to actually train things. And back to programming, we do something like that. We have practice and we have learning. When we learn, we could uh, listen to some theory, we could get feedback. Uh, Actually, getting feedback on what we did is a practice. Okay, so we could watch and read mostly. We could read a book, we could read individual articles, we could read the mm, reference material, technical documentation. The performance of every method is different, but the learning curve is also different. So we probably start with some simple explanations like YouTube videos and books. But when we already have some experience, we could prefer using technical documentation because it is shorter. We get the understanding faster. And now we have an extra explainer, the GPT-like text generators. So that was how we get the explanations and how we learn something. But how can we practice things? And this is, I think, less obvious for many people than the ways to learn. Basically, we are on the same page. We understand that we could get the experience in exercises and in doing the work. But we could combine these situations and get very different results. For example, if you're able to do the work, should you skip the exercises if you're able to do the real project? The answer is not obvious, and we could return to learning languages. So, what is the best way to learn language? Is it to read in that language and to watch some shows in that language, or to do the exercises like Duolingo? And my answer that these things work very different. So to get the proficiency, you need in the end of the day to practice. So you need to read and to watch the real text, the real conversations, and you should also participate in conversations. But this doesn't mean that as soon as you can switch to that type of practice, you should forget small exercises like Duolingo, because as soon as you, as long as you're missing some patterns that you need, you could focus on those patterns specifically, and the exercises of whatever type could do it better for you. uh, the same in gym, people do not train all the muscles at once. They focus on every group of muscles, and this works. It is a no choice that you should be your own tutor. A good tutor, a good mentor will help you, but your the most important tutor should be yourself. You should understand how you learn, you should feel how you progress, and you should decide on your own to switch between different methods. So we've defined different ways of how to do that. And probably let me say a little bit more in details, come up with examples for programming. What could be exercises in programming? You could search for the name of the programming language and the words interactive course, and you will see the courses that are designed that you have a small window to type the code, and you have to do the very short, simple exercises. So you do that short exercise and you get the immediate feedback. Does it work or it doesn't? That's the Duolingo style, and that works for training those little skills, which is much faster for programming language than for natural language because they are synthetic and they are logical. And then you could switch to the project, but what is the chance that you will find the real job having only that training knowledge? Very likely you will have to find some exercise that is designed to be uh, to resemble the actual work you do. And perfectly, that's what we have in Foxmind, that course, for example, is when you get the assignments that are structured like the real world tasks, and you approach them the same as you would do in the real world. So you find the solution on your own, you Google something, and then you get feedback from your mentor. But the complexity of this task, of these tasks, forms a gradient. So the complexity increases gradually, and you, at some point, you come to the real project when you have to design the app. You have to understand what you actually code, what you create, and then decide how will you split this into parts, and then take these tasks that you defined for yourself and actually do them. That's what could gradient before your first job look like, and that's what we actually practice in the schools where I participate as a mentor. Okay, it was long, but I needed to capture all that knowledge.
I'll never complain about it being long. I'll complain if your answers are like 10 seconds and then I have to ask you like 100 questions to fill out the hour. So I'm a happy camper. We talk a little bit about school and just because it can help but come up in such a discussion about education. And so one follow up before we go to our next question is when working on projects in school, say in college, there is pressure to succeed or fail because you could, be kicked out of the program, fall behind your peers. And that pressure is helpful experience because once you're actually working and then there's an expectation to succeed and there's money being exchanged in return for your services, being used to working under that pressure is helpful. Let's just say if someone weren't going through school and they weren't going to get an accreditation that way, are there other ways to feel that pressure?
That's another factor why you should be your own personal tutor, because this pressure works different for different people. And you're right, for some of us, or maybe even for every of us, but not in every moment of our lives, it is very important. And without it, we cannot progress. But it also could be demotivating. So the right learning process should be like a continental breakfast where you could choose what you need, and that is the same true not only for the topics you are going to learn, but also for the structure, for the motivational structure you have. We have very different situation, even in terms of the time we can invest. Someone can invest the whole day, and you will probably need the environment to collaborate with other people. You need to talk with other people, but other will spend only a couple of hours, or even in some days they are able to spend only some minutes for acquiring those skills. And that shouldn't be a blocker, because I learning languages, natural languages, is my model activity. When I study how I learn, when I observe myself learning and draw conclusions out of this. So it is my hobby, but I'm doing progress. And the same it could be switching to new profession if you already work, or if you're busy with your primary education. It could go in different ways, and the way how you motivate yourself, or how the system motivates you, should be the thing that you could choose, because different things work for us. And a couple words about that, progressing in background. So if it feels like solving puzzles, for me in learning languages it was flashcards. Flashcards is not a good way to learn languages, actually. But at some point, it was addictive to me. So the activity was entertaining. And it is not completely useless because learning, having a big vocabulary, but unable to um, build the sentences do not make you able to speak the language, but it helps you to learn to train how to speak the language later, because you don't have to find the words, you already have the words, you just cannot speak yet. And the same for programming. If you're uh, unable to dedicate to learning something, you could try to replace your ordinary entertainment like watching YouTube with solving puzzles. If you found those puzzles could make you think as a developer, and then you will get a long vacation of those 3 months, as I mentioned, and in three you will do that fast. You will do that switch fast because you've already got those skills, and that's a very different track than if you would commit from the day zero to getting the new profession, and you would like to have the techniques that motivate you, that help you learn faster. Plus you cannot learn some skills fast because they need time to become a part of your personality. So again, that's different. If you do that in background, just entertaining, you could get those change of mentality. You could the design thinking, the algorithmical thinking, what you need. But if you start intensively, then you need to focus on the very simple things, on Lego bricks, so you could compose them into a really working app without actually analyzing too much, because you're unable to start analyzing from the very first days. Both are important, and both should be available.
And I think it's important to find different ways to keep your interest consistent, because if you're only focusing on the most intense techniques, then you could, I hate saying the word burnout, but you can definitely run out of a lot of energy pretty quickly. So yeah, burning out. And it just reminds me of, say, someone who's interested in a sport like golf. You have to go to the driving range. You have to focus on developing your swing, in addition to actually going to the golf course. But then there's also days where you don't have the energy to do it. It's helpful to listen to other people talk about it. It's helpful to watch it on TV. It's helpful to play it as a video game. So these are the areas, even if they're not building your most intense and most core skill set, are still helpful to promoting your lifestyle and reminding yourself that this is something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy as well.
Yeah, there are not so many countries where they teach children how to manage their emotions, their psychological state in schools. In most countries, I believe this will come over time, but for most of people today, that's the thing that you should learn. And again, be afraid of any simple answers. For example, if you're doing what you like, then you don't have to work because you're relaxed. This is not true. Uh, the situation is more distinct. If you have some strict goals and strict deadlines, then you spend your energy, and it doesn't matter if is this your passion or not. And as opposite, if you enjoy something without strict deadlines, you're recovering. So you could code on your work and then recover by writing another code, and that would work. This is not recommended, of course, but this is what really works for some people, because the difference is not exactly in what you do, but in the frame you have. So yes, you need passion for what you do, but this passion could be of very different kind. If you don't like to write the code, but you have passion to solve problems, for example, that would work for you, because you will find you could try no code tools just to start. Then you'll be able to write small parts of the code because you'll be really starving for that unique component that you don't have ready made, but you feel that you could produce it for you and you will feel that enjoyment. But another guy will come to the profession by actually liking to write the code instead of solve the test. And this actually works not that good in the real world, but that could be helpful as you learn. So both ways have their advantages, and the only problem will be if you have absolutely no passion, you see no passion in any element of it, then yeah, you're in trouble. You should think about a different profession, or there is still a choice. Try to do something different. For example, you decided to become a backend developer because you think their salaries are the highest, or maybe DevOps. And that could be a problem because it is different to understand what DevOps do in the first place if you're only a beginner. Start with front end, so you will see some that you create something real that you could see on the screens that you could show to your friends. Try something new. Maybe try embedded programming because when a physical device, when you get a physical device and make it do something, it could be exciting for you, for someone. Try to change something, but don't keep going without patience only on the using the external pressure.
So, what are the core requirements for a learning technique to be a valid learning technique? My understanding is that there needs to be a way to validate it and there needs to be a way to practice it, but I would love to hear you expand on that.
They should be validated by you. Back to learning languages, some of the practices that I think really good, there are experts who think that these exact practices are really bad for you. For example, watching videos with subtitles. I strongly believe that you should watch sometime without subtitles and sometime with subtitles because you train different things. But some people, some strong language teachers or polyglot language learners believe that watching movies with subtitles is the wrong way by design, and they do not recommend it to anyone. So there is no such thing as a validation of a practice per se. An important step to validate the practice for you. So you could struggle to understand what practice to use first, when you should consume some theory, when you should solve simple tasks, and when you should switch to complex projects. So you will probably need some external help from a mentor. But if you don't have a mentor, somehow you still could start by experimenting. Just doing something is better than doing nothing. You will find the mentor, just start. However, you should really feel how it goes for you, and if you find some technique enjoyable, still don't forget to change it at some point. And if some technique doesn't work for you, please recall that there are lots of other techniques. If the exercises do not work for you, maybe should try with real project at this point. If the real project is too complex, then okay, maybe you should spend time watching how other people code, for example, online, or explain some topics, or read a book. And rotate. Never stick to any technique, even if it works for you. You still need you need diverse skills and diverse learning technique. Only drop something if it doesn't work for you and you see that you could progress without it. Then this is wrong. This is where you could say it failed validation. The technique has failed validation, but again, that's on you. It is not the intrinsic quality of technique to be good or bad.
As we have these discussions, other topics that I'd love to cover in the future spring to mind. So some stuff that I'd love to talk about in the future, maybe an episode that breaks down the different kinds of developers. Because you mentioned DevOps, which is, I've heard about front end, I've heard about back end, I've heard about UX. DevOps, I've only heard about that very, very briefly in the past. So that's one thing. And then I think also discussing
And
about mentorship too would be an interesting.
and we could also answer what first language to choose because people ask about this. But
Yep, and
yes,
program
all
language.
these topics together worth a separate episode.
Definitely a lot of places that we can go with this. Now, what we want to talk about next is is planning iterations. So this is a little bit where it does fall out of my experience as far as being able to ask the question, but I'm doing my best, which is how do you start by planning something simple and then add degrees of complexity to it?
You should taste everything. If you're trying to learn the particular topic completely before switching to the next one, that's, by the way, how the courses in school are often structured. In history, you could study ancient history, then switch to another period and never return to the ancient history. And this is a failure. It doesn't work that way. You won't remember any. Remember that all the topics are kind of synthetic because in the real work, you will either need all of them, I mean all kinds, but in the same time, you won't need most of them. If you study algorithms, for example, most of the algorithms you will never write yourself because you could reuse what's written by other developers. You use it as a ready-made software. This doesn't mean you shouldn't learn it because it is a training, but it should go in portions when you learn something from that course, and then you postpone and switch to the other things to learn, and then you return to that topic. And the same with platform. If you decide to put Node.js developer into your resume, this doesn't mean that the whole Node.js expertise is the thing that you should learn consecutively. You should learn some basics of Node.js to get the ability to use it, then try to learn how to integrate with services, for example, then learn how to deploy this to make it work for other people from the cloud. That's the beginning of DevOps. But again, do not try to be an expert in every skill. You should rotate, trying them. I like a metaphor that is invented by one school. It is called advanced school. That you have a siege and a siege with very, very big cells. So if you throw their big rocks and small rocks and everything, then they all go through that siege and you're losing most of them. This metaphor shows what do you remember. So at first you're able to remember only the primitive, rough concepts. That's the big rocks that will hold there. Then when you all have this kind of knowledge, the cell of your sage becoming smaller. And so you're able to absorb more granular information, but still not the maximum expertise, etc., etc. So if you wanna become a surgeon, that's a really wrong idea to start with a university course for surgeons. The fastest way to switch to that profession, maybe that's a bad example because not so there are not so much people who switch profession that radically to being a surgeon, but still, if you wanna switch profession, it's wrong to start with the academic book for that, with the most granular, most detailed book for that. The fastest way is to start with a primitive, like for surgeons, it would be a school course of biology, then the course for nurses, probably about this type of work, and then the same sophisticated detailed course, and that works faster. Also, you have to process more information, but this processing works easier and faster than if you start with granular detailed information from the beginning. I'm going to wrap up all that we've just said, that you have to try different things, you have to iterate, and you should have this mental model that if you uh, absorb too much information at once, that information doesn't stick, because it, it doesn't have to what it could stick to. And if you consume it in small portions, these small portions really stick to your existing experience, to things what you've seen, and they need time to absorb. So when switching to another topic, you get it easier to return to this topic in the future. Plus, you won't be able to learn some topic, or maybe okay, that's another dimension. So you should start with trying everything in a really rough way. For example, let's change the topic and uh, take as an example learning languages.
Mhm.
Setting the pronunciation is a very complex thing, but if you get the training, the very basic training in the very beginning, this simplifies even the way how you remember the words, because you're able to distinct the languages, distinct the sounds that are not in the languages you knew before that. So, if you think that I cannot train pronunciations because I don't even know the words, I'm unable to pronounce long structures, this is all true, but you should still try it. Try and fail to succeed, but get that experience that will work in the future after several steps in different topics. And the same in every kind of education.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that depending on what kind of material you're consuming, especially if it's, as you say, an intricate and technically minded book, that material is written with the assumption that you're not a beginner, with the assumption that you are an expert in the field and you're continuing the advancement. So you want to make sure that the material is tailored to where you're at with your development as well.
Oh, this is a big problem, and the problem is honestly the opposite,
Okay,
because
interesting.
there are lots of beginners. So most of the materials are written for the beginners. Most of articles are written for the beginners. So you often struggle to learn something, and if you're you're dedicated to get the profession, it could be easier if you switch to the technical documentation. So you get the really concise form of information that would be difficult at first, but you shouldn't just miss that moment, because reading articles and tutorials could be relaxing, could be easy, but you're not progressing. You should switch there. But that could be noticeable if you like to learn something. This goes as a hobby in about science, popular science, for example. And what makes me complain that there are lots of tubes that explain topics for the very beginning. You want to know about um, quantum mechanics, for example. And of course, if you're not learning, you need some basics about anthropology. And learning about anthropology, I personally want to know, why do we know it was like that? What is the source? And you see that there are lots of materials that explain quantum mechanics on a very basic examples using metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask those questions, why do we think it is like that? There are answers like this, but it is difficult to really meet those answers. So if you take an academic book to satisfy your curiosity, you will realize that it is very difficult to read it. And if you'll try to find this answer on YouTube, then you'll struggle that no one actually touches this answer. Like, for example, the curious thing about quantum mechanics is that it has a real randomness. And the question arises, why do we think this randomness is real? And this question has also a really fascinating answer, but it's very difficult to meet it. And the same when you start in profession, what other people publish and lots of resources, tutorials are really nice start for you. But then you should take your fortune, your destiny into your own hands and decide how to switch, where to switch from it, because that's easier, but that keeps you at the beginner level. And again, if the book is written so complex that you cannot understand that book, this doesn't automatically mean that the book is good. It's not just your level. It is often the book is really wrong. When I was getting my higher education, I saw that many local books were really difficult to read in comparison to the books translated from English on the same subject. So the subject would be even easier than the book itself. So try to always find something. Here I'm recalling one important concept. The best education is that window, that sliding window, when you get the um, materials and the tasks that are a little bit more complex than what you
Hmm.
already know, that what's easier for you. If they're easy, you're not progressing. If they are too complex, you don't understand them. Yes, let's remember about this window and talk about it time to time. I think that's important, and I should capture that information in my meta skills teaching map.
Well, that's some valid insight. And then one other thing that I'd like to offer into it as well is I think part of being able to participate in more complicated learning, there is only so much that you're going to get out of a video or out of written material. Part of it is also being in the conversation. And I don't know if like neurosurgeons get together and have like a Discord channel where they're having like live conversations, but if they had one, they would be at the forefront of their field. So I think just active participation is really important for that advanced learning. Because we've been discussing a lot about just the idea of studying topics. So just to reframe it in a way that's a little bit more streamlined. So do you say definitively that there is a right way and a wrong way to study topics?
Interesting. There is definitely right way and wrong way of studying topics. The only problem that you don't know that ahead. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you see, if you look at the stock market, you could definitely see there the companies that will show 100x, maybe 1000x. The only problem, nobody knows which companies are they, so that's why the index funds exist. Uh, in learning, of course, you cannot get the index of all the learning techniques. So you will have to try, probe, and change them. I've mentioned that you should feel how it goes for you, and the right and wrong thing is a subjective matter. Of course, there is science And the real science is about measurements. But even those measurements are probability based. So the good scientific result for a method is that if we take the conventional method, traditional method, and that's our baseline, what's in medicine is would be a placebo group. You get this new technique, and you see in the end that, say, 10% students did better with this method, and this is a good scientific result. But think of it, applying to yourself. Okay, we know that 10% of students made this better, but for 90% of students, it is no difference with the
Right.
other method. And what's the probability you'll be in 10% or in 90%? These studies
10%?
make sense because
10%? The probability is 10%? I think I know.
uh,
I think.
10% is that things will go better, and actually is a fraction. Okay, no, fraction of percent is too low, but say 35% is still noticeable. That's a scientific result, but this is neglectable from the practical use. This doesn't mean that science is useless in this area, because you need lots of methods. So if you pick the better and better and better method, the way how we learn as a humanity improves. But if you want to build your own career, your own education right now with at the current state of art, you will have to see what the techniques are available, what people say, why these techniques are what they are, and then try and decide, does it work for you or not? And you cannot skip that subjective part of trying and actually evaluating that for you, not in general, not for probability, not in probabilities, but in the reality.
The last thing that I wanted to work on today is to help distinguish the importance of training versus remembering, because memory is important. Computers have memory, we have memory, but memory is also temporary. We forget things. I have good long-term memory, which I need as a writer, because if I don't study character and human behavior, that I can't write. So I have to have a long-term memory. So I'm very lucky for that, even though there's lots of things I wish I could forget that I can't forget. Anyways, whereas training is about being able to convert something into natural behavior to the point where it becomes instinctive. So for people who are struggling with turning memory into training, can you give us any insight into how to replace memory with training?
Yeah, and while you were defining the question, I was thinking about that memory and a skill and a habit is not something different. We have two different kinds of memory. The short time memory, that it's when you read something and you're able to reproduce it right now. And we have the long time memory that is essentially the same machinery as a skill. There is no digital video flow of the events in your brain. You remember things because your brain has found the elements, remembered those elements, and did that in its very own way. And then when you recall things, it assembles the picture based on common sense, patterns, and these very elements remembered for this event. So our memory is different to the computer memory, and it is different to a box with papers. If you put papers in the box, it could be rotten or preserved as it is. But in our memory, if you put something, then it is transformed at this moment. And when you recall things, you change your memories by recalling, because your brain assembles things again and again. But these details are more curious. The most important, not just curious, but practical thing, that it is the same machinery as habits.
Mm-hmm.
So your long-term memory is the change neural path, and your habit and your automatic skill is the same. Maybe different path, maybe a little bit different parts of the brain, but the principle is the same. So if you are doing training, you're doing the best possible remembering. And again, there are different ways of doing so. If you do it the really hard way, your unconscious could miss the principles and you won't remember those things. Or maybe the next time you do the next really complex task, your unconscious will recognize it as something different. So you are not repeating the same things and you're not forming a habit. Instead, if you repeat very primitive things like separate short sentences in natural language learning, it is more probable that you will remember those patterns, especially faster. So you have this basic memory when you read a sentence and you still remember its translation. Then you have the training for your long time memory when you repeat the same simple exercises, simple and similar. So you remember the same principle, the same pattern in different examples, and you remember it faster. That's exactly what Duolingo does. And you have the sophisticated training when you try to connect in a perfect situation, you try to connect together what you've already learned in simple exercises. Because if you don't have the simple exercises, you still learn in the complex situation, but you should rely on your brain to extract the patterns and remember those patterns. And this will take more training from you. And that's the problem of training up the artificial intelligence right now. Artificial intelligence needs huge data sets. The size should be enormous in comparison to what the humans need to learn the same skill. That's a problem the engineers, the AI engineers, are struggling to solve right now. And that's the difference we could leverage in our learning. We could learn on a smaller amount of simpler exercises, and then use our ability to extrapolate and learn in the real situations faster. Otherwise, you set yourself in that situation that resembles what they have for the artificial intelligence. That if you learn on a loosely structured something, then it will take more and much more repetitions to learn the same amount to acquire the same habit, to get the same amount of training.
So I think we're going to leave it at that for today. But just for all of you who have stuck with us for the whole episode, our plan is to do Learning Techniques Part 2. And in that case, we'll be able to start talking about some of these specific techniques and what are their strengths and weaknesses. What are the kinds of people who are drawn to the different techniques. And so that's everything that we got for you today. Once again, my name is Joseph. If you search Joseph Ayani on LinkedIn, if you have any questions or anything that I could potentially help you out with in the wide world of web media, don't hesitate to reach out. And then if you want to contact Pavel, the best place to find him right now would be on X. So it is PAVELKRGN. And with that, that's everything that we've got for today. Pavel, thanks again for your expertise and for bringing this project to life and for allowing me to be a part of it. So that's everything I've got for everybody. Let's have a good one.
Thank you, Joseph. Thanks for everyone for watching us. See you on the next episode.